We are living in unprecedented times. Not only have we entered the age of Aquarius, but we've entered the age of AI. Humanity is about to undergo the most dramatic transformation ever, and I believe that makes it the perfect time for us to address the global mental health crisis. I believe it is through raising human consciousness that we gift people with the tools they need for emotional and mental mastery. Hi, I'm spiritual teacher and speaker, Shaman Isis, and I'm on a one-woman mission to raise human consciousness by teaching spiritual practices and sharing incredible people's heroes' journeys. Join me on Glow Up with Shaman Isis for inspiration for your hero's journey. If you're ready for transformation, check out Glow Up with Shaman Isis, the collection of books and courses.
It's Shaman Isis here, and I am so jacked for our episode of Glow Up with Shaman Isis today. I've got Kelly Sparta on the show, spiritual coach extraordinaire and shamanic practitioner. And we're going to have an amazing conversation about spiritual journeys and plant medicine and being a shaman. Kelly, thank you so much for joining me. Welcome to the show.
Thanks. I'm so glad to be here. We're going to have so much fun. We were chatting before this and I'm just like, I'm so excited for this conversation. So we're going to have
I
a
know.
great time. Yeah.
Yeah, you guys are going to like this. We're going to delve into important moments along the spiritual journey. We're going to talk about Kelly's journey. And we're going to talk about, kind of the popularity of plant medicine, some things to really think about, and, what it's like to really be in shamanic practices. There's a lot of talk about it, a lot of mystique around it. And I think it's time we kind of elevated and modernized our idea of shamans, right, Kelly?
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
So you have to just please take me back to sort of like before and the spirit what kicked off your spiritual journey.
So my mother said I was talking to ghosts in my crib. And so she saw this and she had been psychic when she was a child and she had shut it down because it scared her. And she never figured out how to turn it back on. And she was absolutely committed to the idea that that would not happen to me. And so, from as early an age as she could bring it to me, she did. And so, from the time I was about 5, 6 years old, she started me on Seth and Ram Dass and Abraham Hicks and JC Knight and you name it, we studied it, right? She brought home Est, which is the not kinder, gentler version of Landmark. And she brought that home when I was 6. And so, this was just an ongoing journey. I was doing self hypnosis by the time I was 10. I was reading tarot cards by the time I was 12. We were doing psychic development classes, and I'm reading books and ordering tapes from the backs of books, because I'm that old, and and the so I really just I grew up with this, and people say, oh well, how did when did you start coaching? And I'm like, well, I have some high school yearbook signatures that read like client testimonials, so this is not what I do, it's who I am, right? And so but and so I grew up with sort of the metaphysical side of it, and that was really the path that mom took me on, was the new age metaphysical path. It
Mm-hmm.
was not the shaman, ritual, Wicca, all that stuff path. Those are very different, right? And it
Yeah.
wasn't even energy healing path. That was not part of it either. I'd never heard of energy healing until I was like 28. And so I got married at 21 and married an atheist. And so we didn't talk about that stuff. And except, I brought all of my personal growth work into trying to fix our marriage, which he didn't meet me in. And so therefore it didn't fix. And then I was like, okay, I'm done. Right. Got to go. Woke up when I was 28 and I woke up and I was like, you know what? I had this moment of decision where I had to determine whether I was going to stay in my marriage or leave. And I looked ahead and I was like, if I stay in my marriage, it's going to be 10 years before I come to another choice point. And I'm like, I do not want another 10 years of this crap, right? And that triggered a whole life sort of look, right? Because
Mm.
I looked up and when you're working hard, and I was working hard, right? Because a lot of reasons, but I was working hard. I was a real estate agent at the time. And when you're nose to the grindstone, you don't always look up all the time. I was doing a very masculine path, right? Just like do, 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 do. And I looked up and I realized that I had done the American Dream checklist and I hated my life.
Mhm.
I was done with my husband. The dog didn't even like me. She was in competition with me for his attention. She would literally roll me out of bed at night. Um, I had the big house. I had the 2 cars. I was a pillar of my community, volunteering my time for running a Habitat for Humanity, and I had a very successful business, and absolutely none of it made me happy. And I was just like, you know what? When I was a young child, my mother introduced me to the movie Auntie Mame, which,
Oh, love
uh,
that movie.
right?
Oh,
Rosalind
Rosalind
Russell,
Russell, the only one.
1965 or something. And I always said my whole life, I want to be Auntie Mame without the alcohol
Ah,
because I just,
yes, what a
my mother was an
goal.
alcoholic. So I was like, we don't need to go there. So, and I looked at my life and I'm like, none of this looks like Auntie Mame, right? None of it.
Right.
And I'm like, because Mame was like this amazing figure. She traveled the world and she had positive attitude and she was just a love and she just loved everybody and cared about everybody and she liked interesting thinkers and interesting people and creatives and I was like, yes, those are the people I want in my life and that's what I want to do with my life. And I looked around and I was a real estate agent in, sort of this not really high end town. I mean, not that it wasn't high end. I was in the Groton, New London area. What I'm saying is it wasn't a big city. It didn't have a lot
Mhm.
of those types of people there. It was kind of just a seacoast town, right? And my partner was not with me on the big and bright and shiny. In fact, he would give me a hard time if I stopped for somebody who looked obviously lost, looking at a map. This is the time frame. And I would stop and offer them directions. He's like, "They didn't ask you. Why did you bother them?" And I'm like, "Because I like people and they needed it." Like, I asked them if they wanted it, and if they said no, I would have wandered off. But my partner just was not meeting me in being that person, right? And
Mhm.
so I just leveled my life. I threw it all away. I divorced him, made him take the dog. I sold the house. I sold the business. I quit the nonprofit, and I moved out of state to live with a bunch of people I met at the Renaissance Fair.
I love this. Oh my God. How brilliant. And that's so Anti-Mame. If you guys aren't familiar, Anti-Mame was a movie about a wealthy, I think it's New York City
Yeah.
woman who ends up getting her nephew, custody of her nephew. And she's a bohemian. She's very self-actualized, dresses fabulously. She's stylish and she has self-love, which I think was what you really see in that movie, but you don't really get. I think the reason so many women and gay men love the movie is because it is
Yeah.
a person who would normally be challenged living the most self-actualized existence. So you just threw everything away and said, "I'm going to go be a bohemian."
Yes, that's exactly what I did. And I lived effectively the bohemian hippie lifestyle for the next, decade, right? So I moved in with these people and what I didn't know at the time was that they were all energy workers and shamans. And so I moved into this house. It was a 3-story, 6-bedroom, 4-bath Victorian in North Attleboro, Massachusetts. And um, we would come to call it the magical house because everybody in the house was magical. And so much so that we actually had a set of magical rules for the house, all of which came about because somebody screwed something up, right? So, but the group I was with a working circle. That's who lived there, and we worked together for 4 years, doing deep healing and personal transformation work during that time. So much so that at one point I was doing what I now refer to as foundational deconstruction. I didn't have a name for it at the time, but it's where you
Yeah.
rip out the foundation of your identity. And
Oh, yes.
yes, and I did
Yes.
it so bad that like there was zero foundation left when I was
Yeah.
done. Now, if you've never done this, what
It,
happens is that you lose the ability to do all rote activities. And so I would get out of the shower with shampoo on my hair. I would forget to put toothpaste on my toothbrush. I would literally run into doorways, door frames as I was trying to walk through the doorway because I didn't know where my edges were. I was
mhm.
unsafe to drive. I did not drive for like 3 weeks because I was
Would
unsafe to drive.
would you compare this to spiritual psychosis?
No.
Okay.
No, no.
Just
This was
curious.
just I had pulled out enough of my identity that I wasn't sure who I was. I wasn't seeing things and being pulled in. I still had the ability to manage myself. I
Mm-hmm.
just wasn't able to do the rote activities because those were built on the foundation of my identity. We
Mm-hmm.
we build the rituals of our lives on our identity. And it's like, oh, I am this person, I do these rituals every day, right? And when
Yeah.
you don't know who you are anymore because you ripped it all out, those rituals fall down and they don't
Yeah.
exist. And so things like being able to drive without thinking about it was gone. And I was
Mm-hmm.
like, how about I just don't drive for a while? you know? Um, and so when I reestablished my foundation, all of those things came back. But for the moment, they were just, I was kerfuffled, right?
How long can I ask you how long was that process?
About 3 weeks. Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay. The only reason I ask is that when I woke up, I had burnt out, and when I demasked, I had an executive dysfunction.
Mm.
I had no executive function. I could not keep a Zoom. I still have challenges with this. I could not keep a Zoom meeting to save my life. I could not put a calendar prompt in. I mean, just like absolutely all ability to function as an adult just went out the window.
Yeah.
And that went
That's
on for like
burnout.
2 years.
Yeah, that's burnout. And that's
Yeah.
how long burnout takes when you don't know how to do it, right?
Yeah.
And even then, even if you know how, it still takes a long time, depending on how
Yeah.
long you burned yourself out for. Yeah, I've
Yeah.
done that too. So,
Yeah. It was 40 years, it took me almost 4 years to really get back to where I'm almost at like full capacity. Not sure if I
mhm,
want to get to completely full.
yeah.
Anyway,
Well,
keep
and
keep going.
right now there's like all this stuff going on in the ethers where, and I'm hearing this from a lot of people, and I'm having this experience myself where, uh, you are, um, you're going just fine, everything's great, and then poof, you must sleep now. And are you having that? Because
Yeah,
I am
yeah.
having that, and everybody I'm talking to is like, that has been going on for about a month now, and I'm like,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah, I fell
Mhm.
asleep in the middle of the day yesterday, which is not
Mhm.
something I do very often. It was only for
Yeah.
15 minutes, but it was like, this is weird. I must lay down.
If you're ready for transformation, check out Glow Up with Shaman Isis, the collection of books and courses.
Yes. It's like I will lay down or I will fall down. I do not
Mhm.
have an option, right? It's not like I can override it and have a cup of coffee or whatever. Nope, nothing is going to fix it, right? You got to lay down. So that's that, and that's different than burnout. That is something that is happening in the ethers right now, and I still have yet to identify it. Quite frankly, I've been very busy and I haven't looked very hard,
Yeah,
but I'm
at least at
just
least
like
you're at least you're being
I'm like
honest.
I'm
You
like
know what
I'll
happens?
take a nap.
You know what happens to me? I've noticed whenever I have like I'll get dark for a little bit,
Mm.
and I'm like, well, I'm not being triggered by anything. I know my triggers really well. I will look, and the Schumann resonance is off the charts every single time that happens. It's so
Interesting.
weird. Anyway, I want to keep hearing this. So you went bohemian, then you had a
I
few
did.
weeks of like not being able to function.
And then what happens? So here's the thing about foundational deconstruction: you don't put it back together; it automatically comes back together. And if you try and put it back together, you're going to go backwards in your identity because the you that you used to be is the one who would put it back in place, right? And so you have to wait for it to recoalesce. And somehow intuitively, I understood that, even though I didn't know what the hell was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I was just like, nope, I just got to be with this and let it recoalesce. And when it did, I was floored at the things that were left out, things that had been cornerstones of my prior existence, like perfectionism, right? Yeah. It's got to be
Yeah.
100%. It's got to be done to 100% and
Yeah.
perfect, right? That
Mm-hmm.
was just gone. There were just things that were not part of my beingness anymore. And I was like, that's interesting. I don't know who this person's going to be, but it's going to be interesting, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, that was my first real hardcore deconstruct that I went through. And then so I worked with this group for 4 years. We did a lot of work with each other, and then the entire house just sort of dissipated, and people just moved out of state.
Mhm.
And, there were only 2 people out of like 8 people who had lived in that house who were still around when I was done. Right. And so when that happened, I actually ended up on Walkabout, and I had just learned what Walkabout was 3 months before this happened to me. It's like, oh, so if you don't know what the definition of Walkabout is, it's walking out into the world until you find yourself.
Mhm.
And so most people think it's in Australia and the outback, but no, this is an Aboriginal process that they do, and they do it in the outback in Australia. But the idea is to walk into your world, right? And so for me, my world was the U.S. in my car, and so I called it Drive About, right? Which if you listen to
That's so
my
true. Yeah.
right? Yeah. So if you listen to my podcast, I actually wrote a song from the journey, and that's what the opening and closing of my Spirit Sherpa podcast is. So it's the song that I wrote from that journey. And so the that walkabout took me a year, where I lived on $350 a month and the kindness of strangers. And
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
so
Yeah.
I was all over the country, 14,000 miles.
I love that I'm so excited that you're sharing this story, and you're everything you're saying is fresh, I think, for a lot of people. I just have to go back for a second. So I love that you're talking about what happens when you have these spiritual experiences, because there's so many people across the planet that are having spiritual awakenings,
Yes.
and there's a lot of talk about things like spiritual psychosis, which is something I understand, and burnout, and suddenly going to have to find yourself. So that's a process I went through myself. I just literally I got up one day and said, I can't do this anymore. Here's everything I own. I'm going to leave and go find a way to actually function. And then spent 2 years really finding out who I was. And I think it would have taken less time, except I put myself in a lot of environments where the old version of me had existed
Mm,
before.
yeah.
And so there was this back and forth of, the new version, the old version, and it took me a little bit of to really like hone in. And then this spending a year really walkabout or drive about, as you did. I think a lot of people, you see people doing the camper van thing. I think it's the same thing,
Yeah.
where they're getting a camper van and then driving around the country for a year or two.
Same idea. Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, I was it was very interesting because people were like, "Oh my God, you're so brave," and I kept saying, "No, I'm not," right? Because I felt so led, right? I wasn't trying to be modest or humble. I literally, you can't be brave if you're not scared, right? Brave is overcoming your fear to do something anyway,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
I wasn't scared. I was feeling so led and so guided that I literally had no fear about it. I was just like, okay, here we go. And I did the same thing. I opened up my storage unit and I gave away everything I owned. And I had one of my students, I was at her house and there was a bathroom reading, and I picked up a book. It was Lame Deer Seeker of Visions, and I opened it to a random page right after I scheduled for everybody to come and take my stuff. And the deal was you could take anything you wanted, but you had to help me bring the rest of it to the nonprofit, right, to the giveaway.
Hmm.
And I opened the book and it said the apprentice shaman just before his final initiation will give away everything he owns. And I
Oh,
went,
you just made the hair on my entire body stand on end.
I was like,
Oh,
oh shit, I'm
when
screwed. Right?
that's it. In moments like that, it's like you really understand that you're being called, and it's
Yeah,
like, okay, the signs and synchronicities. I mean, it was nuts.
it was. Yeah.
You're just like, people wouldn't believe the sheer number, and if they aren't spiritual or been on that journey. How
Yeah.
powerful is that? Wow.
Right. Yeah. It was insane. And so, from there, I went to a festival. And at that festival, so many synchronicities happened that we could do an entire podcast by itself on it. So I'm not going to talk about that. I'm just going to reference them and call it good. But the thing that was relevant there was that I was getting a tattoo. And there were a lot of synchronicities around that happened as well. But when it happened, I had 2 people I had asked to hold space for me. One was one of the people who had lived in the house with me, and one was the person whose house I was planning to go to after the event, who I had met at the event. Interesting story is that I had been circling his tent trying to set up my my tent, not knowing it was his tent. I hadn't met him yet, and I couldn't find a place to be near him, and I ended up someplace else. But when I went to when I met him and went back to his tent to grab something with him, I was like, oh crap, this is who I was circling, right? And so when we met, he actually walked up to me, and he was a friend of a woman I had made friends with while I was there. And he, she was like, "Oh, this is him," and he walked right up and planted a kiss on my lips, and I was like, and he was like, "I don't know why I just did that," and I said, "And I don't know why it's okay," but it was
Like,
just
I'm
like,
not going to overthink it.
and so I had asked both of them to hold space for me while I got this tattoo, which was my dedication to Grandmother Spider, who had called me into shamanism, right? So when I was all right, so I got to tell a little more of the story. So when I was in the magical house, at one point I'd walked into the basement, and it's a Victorian house, right? So they don't have light switches; they have the little pull switches from the center
Yay.
thing, right? And so it was night, it was dark, pre cell phone where you have a flashlight on you at all times, right? And so I'm like walking across the room, feeling for this light switch string, and I feel like I walked into a big spider web, and I was like, whatever it is that I need, I don't need it this bad. I'll get it in the morning. And I turned around and I left. The next morning, I got down there, and there was not a single spider web in sight. And I realized that when I had come back upstairs, there wasn't a single spider web on me. I hadn't thought it through at the time, but
Yeah.
there wasn't. And so I mentioned this to my friend in the house, and he's like, "You better answer Grandmother Spider, because she's calling you, and you don't want her to do you what she did to me." And I'm like, "What'd she do to you?" And he said, "She hatched an entire nest of spiders over his bed, and they came down to feast on him." I'm like, "Yeah,
Ah!
I'd like to avoid that. What is that? What does
Yeah.
it mean? What is Grandmother Spider? I don't know. What's a totem? What's a spirit animal? What's shamanism? I don't know any of this stuff," because he was introducing it to me. And I'm like, "I have no idea what this is." And so, flash forward maybe a year later, I'm on walkabout. I'm getting a tattoo as a dedication to Grandmother Spider so that I could learn to walk the web of life gracefully before I learned to
Mhm.
weave it, right?
Yeah.
And so I'm there at the festival, and the guy wasn't, so my two people dropped out when I got there because they'd been up all night at the drum circle. And when I got there, the tattoo artist had also been up all night at the drum circle and was asleep. I had to wake him up for my appointment. And he had very tight appointments. So if you didn't make your appointment, you didn't have it, right? And I had to wait for him to make his peanut butter and jelly sandwich for breakfast. And I walk into the tent area where he does his tattoos, and I'm sitting there as I'm walking in. I'm going, I don't know if I really am supposed to be doing this, because two people have dropped out. He's not even awake yet. Am I supposed to be? There, suspended from a single thread in the center of the tent, was a spider. And I went, okay, I meant to do this, and it crawled back
Yeah.
up and
Yeah.
disappeared.
Oh, that was a message from spirit.
Right?
Ah,
Yes.
yes. Yes.
And so I am getting tingles now too. So I go in, I get ready, I sit down. This random woman comes up and starts talking to me while he's getting his stuff ready. And she and I are chatting, and we're having a good time and whatever. It's 20, 30 minutes later. And he says, "Okay, we're ready to get started." And she says, "Do you mind if I stay?" Now, when you're doing ritual tattooing, whoever was there is getting built into that too. That their energy is going
Yeah.
into that tattoo.
Yeah.
And I surprised myself because I looked at her really hard. I was like, and I went, "Yeah, you can stay." And he said, "Okay, just state your intention again so that we're clear about what the intention is." And I said, "Well, I want to learn to walk the web of life gracefully before I learn to weave it." And she said, "Isn't that funny?" And I was like, "What?" She said, "That's what I'm doing. I spin my own thread and I weave my own cloth, and that's what I'm here is selling my wares." And I was just like, I started to cry.
Ah!
And he starts to tattoo, and they start to chant, and I am gone on my vision, right?
Oh, I
I'm
love this. You're making the
out,
hair stand up all over my
right?
body.
I am out in my vision, and Grandmother Spider comes up to me. I'm in this castle, right? And it's got stone walls, gray stone walls, and in the center of the room, the only thing in the room other than Grandmother Spider and me is this massive, like 4 foot circumference well that is up, like 3 feet off the ground, and big, huge well. And I start crying and I'm looking at Grandmother Spider and I'm like, thank you for deeming me worthy of support. I'm so grateful. Thank you for sending me the support. She backhanded me across the room. She literally just threw me across the room. And which of course didn't hurt because I was in the spirit world, right? But I was just like, I was definitely shocked. I was like, what is going on, right? Because spirit animals, shaman stuff, not always the kindest things, right? This is not
Yeah, a
dealing with
lot of people,
angels.
yeah, a lot of people
Yeah.
don't understand that. It can be
Yeah.
really rough.
It can be very rough. And she just looked at me and she's like, look at that web. And when I went to the well, just about a foot underneath the surface of the well, covering the entire well itself, was a spider web. And she said, "You look at that web. You see that strand right there that's fraying and needs shoring up?" I said, "Yes." She's like, "Do I ask if that needs shoring up and if it's worthy of it? No. I shore it up because it needs shoring up, not because it's worthy of it. It's part of the web. Therefore, the web, it depends upon it being shored up just like everything else. Have you ever asked anybody if they were worthy of the healing you offered them?" And I was like, "No." And right. Get a grip. I was just like, "Okay." Right.
Oh, that's just funny. Yeah, yeah. You're like, okay, okay, okay. Yeah, I'm worthy. I'm worthy.
Yeah, it was worthiness didn't exist, right? That's
Mhm.
what she was trying to tell me back then.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's what I tell my clients now. I'm like, look, worthiness is a construct designed to manipulate you by people who
Mhm.
don't like who you are, right? And
Right. Yeah,
it's
yeah.
it is completely anathema otherwise,
Mhm.
because if you think about it, we are all one. I am everything, you are everything, everything is me, right?
Yeah.
If I am everything and everything is me, where does worthiness fit into that? If you
Mhm.
already are something, how can you possibly be worthy of it?
This is one of
Right?
my pet
Yeah.
peeves with a spiritual community
Oh God.
as a is that there's so much emphasis on this 144,000, which has nothing to do with people, and this, you're special, you're a chosen one, and it's like, well, we're all chosen. Like
Yeah. Thank
like I
you.
get it when you first wake up and you're kind of delulu, you need to grasp onto some things. I get that that's us still deep in our ego, and it's like, no, we're all chosen.
Yeah. Well, and sometimes I don't know the 144,000 except as it relates to Jehovah's Witnesses, but I don't know about that because I just don't follow enough of the stuff out there.
Yeah,
But
it's social media stuff. Yeah.
okay, let's
Yeah,
not go there.
supposedly there's 144,000 people on the planet here to change everything, but it's really more of a reference
Oh no, it's a
to.
100,000.
Oh,
It's not
that saw
144.
that on your website. Yeah, I
Yeah,
wanted to hear about that. Let's keep going
yeah,
with
yeah.
this where this
Okay,
so the spider mother spider gave you the lesson, the worthy
yeah.
lesson.
And I honestly have I have no memory of the rest of that journey. But and this happens, guys, okay? When you go into a journey and whatever you experience exceeds your threshold of assimilation, right? It exceeds your ability to understand and comprehend what it is that you saw, or it overly challenges your identity to see
Mm-hmm.
it, right? You will forget it and you will think, "Oh, I fell asleep." You never fell asleep. You exceeded your sphere of assimilation.
Ooh,
And so, yeah.
yes, yes, I love that.
Yeah, so I have no idea what the rest of the journey was. But that was the part that I took back with me, right? And
Mhm.
so that was my initiation with Grandmother Spider, and she has followed me ever since. And big surprise, she's on the back of my shoulder. She's followed me ever
I
since.
knew it. Do you know that? Okay, you guys the spiritual folks who are listening to me are gonna appreciate this. So, we're all psychic. It's something that I've been tapped into, like you, since I was an infant. And as soon as we started talking, I saw a spider web on your back.
Yeah.
And I almost asked you at that moment if you had this. We had just started filming. I almost asked you, do you have a spider web tattooed on your back? And then you mentioned tattooing. And I was like, if she says it's a spider web, I'm going to be like,
You know what the other one is?
what, what, what?
So I've got a
Oh,
snake
yeah,
on
yeah, yeah.
my
No,
shoulder.
I just
Yeah.
saw a spider web.
You only saw the one. Yeah. Well, that's because that's a story I was going to tell you. But yeah. Um, yeah. So and this is how it works, guys. We get previews of what's going to happen sometimes when it's relevant,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah,
And
yeah,
so I'm not surprised at all that that was something that you saw, right?
yeah.
Um, and so, I continued my journey. I learned my things. There was so much I can't. So if you're really curious about this, I kept a live journal. This is how
Oh, I
long ago
love
this
that.
was. It was
Yeah, yeah,
2002.
yeah.
I used to have to stop at internet cafes to be able to type up my live journal. Um, and so I have translated that live journal to my website. And so if you go on my blog, it says, walkabout journey, and you can just follow the whole journey. But
Love
um,
that.
not enough time to talk about it all here. It's insanely lots of stuff. But two readers on that journey told me that I would not understand the full import of the journey for at least 10 and possibly 20
Yeah.
years.
Yeah, can I tell you it's a little it's a little frustrating when you know that you're not getting the whole thing, and if you're a perfectionist,
Mm, yeah.
which is something I really had to work on. I'm like you. I was a perfectionist. It's all trauma-based perfectionism. God, don't judge me. Don't find anything wrong with me, because if you find something wrong with what I'm doing, then that will mean I'm not perfect enough, and you can pick on me or say I'm not allowed to do things. Like, the whole perfectionism thing is just that's a whole podcast in and of itself.
Yeah. All by itself. Yeah.
Yeah, I think spiritual journeys, which is why I'm so glad you're going into detail. It's really difficult for somebody who's still plugged into the matrix, who's still plugged into the beliefs, and they think that the things that you talk about when you're spiritual or you're awake are conspiracy theories. Like, 3 years ago, I did a video about the death of the American dream and the fact that the politicians and corporations were destroying the country and putting us in extraordinary debt. And people were like, they're like, "Girl, there's not the American dream has not died. You're being cynical." And I'm like, "I'm not being cynical. I'm a spiritual person trying to tell you the truth about a situation that we find ourselves in. We need to do something about it." And
Yes.
it's funny to see 3 years later now there's all this open conversation about the truth of what's been going on for such a long
Yeah.
time. And I think that's
Well,
going to cause a lot more people to wake up.
yeah. Well, and that, and before. So I just want to reference, if we're talking the death of archetypes, because that's an archetype that's dying, right? And mostly dead at this point.
Yeah.
And I remember vividly the other archetype that I saw die. Do you remember?
Oh, and now I'm dying to hear.
So it's so funny because we both said die. Princess Diana, when
Oh
she
yeah.
died, she took the fairy princess archetype. She took that with her.
Yeah. Yeah,
She
that you just gave me
destroyed it.
chill bumps, because you're
Yeah.
absolutely right, she did.
She broke it. Yeah.
Yeah.
And so,
And that fantasy, I think it's sort of that whole she was the
yes.
fracture in the whole Disney fairy tale,
Yeah. Yeah.
of,
But
of a woman who needs to be chosen to be worthy.
she embodied that archetype, and then she
Hmm.
broke it.
Hmm.
And that was her purpose on the planet, was to break it. And that was part of the transition of women into their power again, because the fairy princess was gone, right?
Yeah.
And so
In its place, and in its place, she was becoming the crone. And
oh,
honestly, I think one of the main reasons she was taken out was because
oh,
of what
yeah.
she was capable of in her fully actualized self.
Well, she had dubbed herself the Queen of Hearts. And so she stepped out of princess into queen, which is in opposition to the actual Queen of England, which was not okay.
Not
So
Yeah.
yeah, whole thing, right? So anyway, she broke that archetype hard. And so, that's what some people are here on the planet to do, is to break the archetypes, right? So
Yeah.
it's a very interesting dynamic. So, yeah, so much stuff.
Oh, I'll tell you a couple of interesting points on my own journey. So, for those of you who are new to the show, I woke up right before the closures. I wasn't what I'd say fully vested in my spiritual journey, but I was awake, going, "Oh my gosh, we're about to close," and people are like, "We're gonna close as a country." I'm like, "No, I'm telling you we are. I'm not asking you. I'm not. I'm just informing you."
Right.
And I couldn't get anyone to listen, and then everything started happening, and I was like, "Oh my goodness, this is out of control." But anyway, at one point, my spirit guides asked me to go. So I was called to back up for a second. I was called to shamanism as a teenager. I had every single thing happen, including like 5 near-death experiences in one summer. I was like, "You guys are really trying to get my attention."
Wow.
Um, uh, serious car accidents, being pushed, not pushed, falling off of a roof, getting trampled by a horse. Like, it was insanity. Going to juvenile prison. It was a prison when it has a huge steel door that closes. And at 13, anyway, I was called to shamanism. I had a shaman move in next door to me, and she started to teach me about natural remedies and healthy eating and raw eating, really. And I was like, no, thank you. This reminds me too much of the nuns I grew up with and the orphanage I grew up in.
Mhm.
And so I went running, and it took me decades to finally wake up. And when I finally did, it was really a powerful awakening experience. I think it is for everybody, of finally becoming myself. And I remember my spirit guide saying, we need you to go out to the pond, lake, whatever you want to label it, and start to chant, to wake other people up. And I was like, excuse me?
That's so funny because I tell people all the time, you'll know you're there when spirit starts telling you to do things that make you go, you want me to do what?
I was like, I'm sorry. The people who live in my community are already looking at me like, what the heck happened? Because I'm walking around with, like, different makeup and, like, with this dazed look on my face. I was high as a kite, and on life and other things. But what can I say? I was going through my process. Anyway, they said, we need you to go out to the water, find a way to float above the water and begin to chant that it's time for everyone to wake up. And I was like, you want me to float and chant in my neighborhood pond where people can see me? And they were like, yeah. So anyway, it was stuff like that, that and the synchronicities, the signs and synchronicities that come along, like the number of birds and
Yeah. Oh my God,
butterflies
the
and
bird.
bees. Yeah, you
I'm
had
just
that same thing,
I
right?
I am getting it now. I mean, my client also just contacted me like 2 days ago. I had a client who contacted me and said, there are birds everywhere. I don't know what's going on. I've got a little sparrow who will come here on my window and like look at me and peck at the window every time I'm sitting in here.
I love it. I love it. It's so
Yeah.
I believe so. This is my theory about birds. So ibises were worshipped by the Egyptians, and I think one of the reasons that they were is because, and I noticed this because ibises and herons started showing up when I woke up, and I mean it was crazy how many were showing up every single day. I was like, what is going on? Everywhere I was going, it was like even my friend said, when you visit me, herons start showing up. Anyway, I started noticing all these ibises, and Egypt was something I had memories of as an infant, and it's been part of my life, which is where Isis comes from. Anyway, the point is that I believe that the Egyptians worshipped ibises because they sense somebody who's in higher consciousness. They feel energy, and they're the first alert that there's something off about someone. I really think that's a theory, but I think there's
That's
something to
interesting.
that. And the reason that I came to that conclusion was that I had been taking photographs with a 35 millimeter of all the birds and butterflies and bees that were coming around, and dragonflies, because I was just utterly fascinated and so present in those moments. Such a beautiful time of my spiritual journey, really, to abandon the old self and to feel free again and to be in wonder of the universe. I think that's the thing that gets everybody hooked on spirituality, is
Yes.
when you become present again, and you're like, oh my God, look at the wings on that dragonfly. Anyway, I was taking pictures of them, and I noticed that I couldn't get a good close up of the birds because they always stayed just far enough away. And then one day, about 6 months after I'd started my shadow work, I was out taking pictures, and all of a sudden, a gray heron stayed right where it was, and I was able to sit down on the bank, and it was right there, just like a foot away, and it just hung with me and spread its wings and allowed me to take all these amazing photographs. And it dawned on me all of a sudden that I had reached a level of vibration that was at one with nature.
Yeah.
And so that led me to this idea that birds sense vibration
Yeah.
in
When we
humans.
first moved in here so we live in Panama now.
Hmm.
And when we first moved into this house, we had a hummingbird that came flying in the door and just flew around our house for a while. So, yeah.
I love that. Oh my goodness, you must have been like, and a hummingbird of all things, because they're so shy of everything.
Yeah. So, well,
Yeah.
not so much down here. People feed them, but yeah.
So you've gone through these incredible experiences. You got the tattoo. Where are you off to next on this incredible journey?
Oh, so I eventually made my way back and ended up while I was on the journey, I had met somebody and ended up coming back to Massachusetts, which I didn't expect that I was going to when I left. And I came back and I needed a job because I was, I was back. And so I got a job at a real estate company doing training and whatever. And, I continued my work, right? I'm still doing my work. And I remember, a year after joined that company as a manager, I left to start my own real estate training practice. And I opened that company up. And on the side, I was doing spiritual classes and all this other stuff, right? And I remember I was sitting with a student of mine in a donut store somewhere. I don't remember which one. And oh no, we were in a restaurant. But anyway, he asked me what's next, and my phone rang. And I picked up the phone, and this guy is talking to me. Now, I had opened a oh, I've got this out of order. This happened before I left. Anyway, I had opened a spiritual education and healing center. And so this was before I left on walkabout. But um, I had opened this store and I was doing classes, right? And one of the classes I had done was life after divorce. Now, I had put it out. I was in my panic pivot era where I was like, I give something like 3 days to work, and then I go, oh, the universe didn't put the stamp of approval on the forehead, so it must be something else. So I had handed out a sum total of maybe 12 flyers. So I see you recognize that era, right?
Oh my God, I can't. I love panic pivot. I'm so stealing that from you because I had that happen repeatedly. Like I would be going in the direction I would think I'd know what I was doing. And all of a sudden I was like, well, that didn't pan out. And I would turn and run the other direction.
Right.
And it was like 2 years of me just going, beer, beer, beer.
Only two? You
And
did well.
of course, nothing worked out because I couldn't stay focused on any particular
Right.
solution because I didn't understand that it was going to take repetition.
Right. Yeah, that's exactly what was with me too. And so I had handed out maybe 12 flyers for this class that I never ran. Okay. And this guy is calling me. And he's like, who's this? And I'm like, you called me. Who's this? Right. And he's like, I'm looking at this flyer. And I'm like, what flyer? And he said, this life after divorce flyer. He said, I found it in my visor. I don't know where it came from, but I just lost custody of my kids. I haven't slept in 2 days. I'm exhausted and I'm overwhelmed. And I just came out of the courthouse and I sat down in my car and I flipped the visor because I was going to take a nap, and this fell into my lap. And that's why I'm calling. And I said, well, I think you'd better come over here. And so, we met him at a donut shop that was halfway between where we were and he was. And he proceeded to tell me this story of how wolf had been following him. And everywhere he would go there were wolves following him, and he was telling me all this other stuff that was going on in his life, and it was clear he was having a shamanic awakening, and that the wolves were calling him and the shamanism was calling him, and he had lost his freaking mind. And I'm like, okay, you need to go lay down in your car for a couple of hours because you are almost psychotic at the moment because you haven't slept for 2 days.
Yeah.
And so get a couple of hours sleep. I'll come out and get you. And then, we can talk some more. And while he's out sleeping, I'm looking at my student who's like, oh my God, what happened? Right. I asked what was next. And then we're here. How does this happen? I'm like, welcome to my life. Right. And so I go to the bathroom and I'm in the bathroom talking to spirit and saying, I'm on the toilet talking to spirit going, okay, I'm catching this one for you, but this is not what I do. I don't do this. I don't want to do this. And they're like, no, you were the only person within 75 miles. I'm like, okay, fine. I'll catch this one for you. Right. So, but it's considered negotiations. Right. And
Yeah.
so I walked him through what was going on, explained the process to him, whatever, and sent him on his way. But that's one of the sorts of things that happen, right? Is sometimes you just get things dropped in your lap.
I'm kind of feeling like that's sort of like what everything is,
Yes.
is this sort of like getting dropped in your lap. With the few minutes we have left, I would love to touch on shamanism. So before we started recording, we talked about plant medicine, and I'm a big supporter of plant medicine. I believe that Western medicine has basically destroyed Americans' health, and has done nothing but get in bed with fast food and mass produced food to turn us all into a bunch of piggy banks. And so I'm a fan of plant medicine, but as a shaman, I don't really. It's not something I push.
No.
And one of the biggest misperceptions I think for a lot of people is, and I remember when I first started to introduce myself to people as shamanisis, I would get this like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
do you do ceremonies? I'm like, yeah, I do a lot of ceremonies. They don't involve what you're thinking
Right.
necessarily. And so I wanted to touch on that, like that sort of, the modern shaman. I think people really need to evolve their perceptions of what shamanism is.
Well,
I
yeah,
think for listeners, I have to just say really quick, a lot of people, like I get people saying, "Oh, are you indigenous?" And it's like, no, I'm not. But shamans have been in cultures all around the world for thousands and thousands of years. They've
right.
existed in the Irish world and in the English world and in the German world and in Nordic and in America. And it's much broader and more diverse than I think a lot of people actually understand. And the word shaman is something that was created, Western created to
Yes, it actually comes out of
label.
Russia.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
the term comes out of Russia. So
Mhm.
yeah, but I tell people all the time, you ask 100 shamans what a shaman is, they're going to give you 100 different answers, and
Yeah.
that's because that's sort of the nature of shamanism, is that the shaman is who the shaman is, right? The shaman does what that person who's the shaman does. There is no cookie cutter definition of shamanism, which is why, like 15 years ago, on some random Facebook group around shamanism, somebody was saying we need to certify shamans, and everybody who was actually a shaman is like laughing their butt off, right?
No.
We're like,
Yes.
no, you can't do that. It is not possible. But
Yeah.
there's also this weird thing in shamanism that if you have not been acknowledged as a shaman by another shaman, you really can't claim to be a shaman. You can say it, but it'll go dunk, thunk, thunk in your
Hmm.
beingness, right? For years I called myself a practicing shaman, even though I knew I had all the shamanic skills. I had not been acknowledged by another shaman because I had studied with like 80 different people over the course of my life. And so no one person came and said, okay, you've completed the
Yeah.
training and here's the stamp of approval that says you're a shaman, right? And I
Which
got
is, let's be
my,
honest, that's all about money. I mean, the whole
yeah,
the
totally.
monetization of
Yeah.
everything. When I hear people say that, oh, did you get a certification? It's like, shut up. Could you
Yeah.
please just shut up, please?
Yeah. So, there are skill sets that are required to be a shaman. And,
Hmm.
if you're going to do things, you need to actually know what the hell you're doing. You can't be a shaman in a weekend. Let's get a grip. Okay. So let's start there. But I actually got my acknowledgement accidentally. I had a friend who was having a house clearing done, and she asked me to come over and help hold space. And I was like, yeah, okay. And the shaman who was doing the house clearing was unpacking his spirit box, which was a Rubbermaid tote, by the way. Um, and he pulls out his eagle feather, and he pulls it out and he starts to put it down, and he's like looking at it, and it's like, the feather needs to be introduced to you. And I was like, okay. He said he handed the feather over, and I communed with the feather for a moment, and had the introduction, and then I handed it back, and he said, why didn't you tell me you were a shaman? And
Oh, I love that.
that was my acknowledgement, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
I didn't have the guts at the time to say, well, I wasn't until a minute ago, right? But I just said, it didn't seem relevant, right? Uh, and so, he invited me to be part of the clearing process, but not everybody gets their acknowledgement, right?
Yeah.
My friend Kathy worked with a shaman. She did the whole process, and he never acknowledged her. Should have, but didn't.
Which
And
is kind of the whole point, I think, of what we're
uh-huh,
talking about is like
yeah,
when egos get involved, it's like, do we have to make this more complicated than somebody wanting to just be a community healer? Can we just
right.
leave it at that you care
Yeah.
and you want to help people?
So, when she and I were working together, I looked at her one day and I said, Kathy, you're a shaman.
Ah, I
And she
love
was like,
that.
oh, everything
Oh,
opened up,
yay.
right? There was like this huge opening for her. I actually just acknowledged one of my students as a shaman like a couple weeks ago because he's there, you know?
Hmm.
And, we've been working together for 4 years and he's there. And I was like, he didn't ask me if to do it. He didn't anything. I just looked at him and I'm like, acknowledgement, right?
Hmm.
Because it was time, right? And that's when it should happen, not when somebody pays a certification fee or whatever. It's when it's
Yeah.
time. right?
Yeah. I love that. That's so important. I can't believe goodness. We have just a minute left.
Oh no. Okay.
I know I could just keep talking to
I
you.
know.
This could have been another hour. Maybe we should do another and pick up. Let's, you know what, Kelly, let's
I'd love
do that. Let's do a part 2
Yeah,
and
let's
pick
do
up
it.
and talk about, practices and, where the spiritual world is right now and consciousness. And I want to hear more about your 100,000.
Yeah.
For our listeners to part 1, because we're going to do a
Mhm.
part 2.
Yeah.
If they want to find out more about your work and events and things like that, what would they do?
So you go to kellysparta.com. So if you're watching the video, it's on the screen. But if you're listening, it's KELLE, just E, Sparta.com. And if you want to get to know me a little bit better before you jump in that far, come and see me on my podcast at Spirit Sherpa or spiritsherpapodcast.com if you need a website. And make sure you get the Boundaries for Empaths program on the homepage of the website because that shit will change your life. If you are an empath, this is going to totally change the way you experience your world. I can't tell you how many people are like, "Holy crap, I feel so much better." I'm like, "Yes, okay." So definitely get that download. The 100,000 is on the site. I'm doing free training for the people who are part of the 100,000, and the 100,000 is the people who are here to uplevel the planet. And you'll know if you're one of them because this was your experience when you woke up. You're immediately overwhelmed. You're like, oh my God, I have this massive mission. I don't know what the mission is. I don't know what I'm supposed to do. I have no idea what's going on, but I know I'm late. Okay.
Yes, that was such an accurate description. Yeah.
Right?
No, I know that whole conversation, that whole feeling of waking up and being like, oh my gosh, how am I supposed to do this?
Exactly. And so I'm actually doing free training for people who had that experience at their awakening. And I want to be really clear. This is not a chosen one thing, right?
Yeah.
It's we came onto the planet for a mission, and much like being a shaman, everybody's like, "Oh, I want to be a shaman." No, you don't. You don't want to be a shaman. It's fucking hard to be a shaman. Okay, this is not going to be easy either. Okay, this
Yeah.
is not a chosen one. This is we came in because we had a mission to fulfill, and we chose this path. And so I'm teaching
Yes.
people how to hold their energy, expand their energy, and be able to connect to one another to create the grid that's necessary to blanket the planet. And I'm doing that free. So that's also on the
Love
homepage
that.
of the website. You can join the Discord server where we're organizing that.
I love that. Oh my gosh, you guys heard it right here. Talk about a lot to learn on her website. Visit kellysparta.com. And we're definitely going to do a part 2 because there were so many things that we didn't get a chance to cover today. If this is your first time here, I am spiritual teacher and 3-time bestselling author, Shamanisis, also known as Cynthia Elliott to my friends and family. If you've never visited my website, go check it out, shamanisis.com. If you're curious about my books, you can find them there. Any events that I have coming up, you can find them there. As well as my magazine, Soul Tech Magazine. And of course, you can always visit soultechfoundation.org to learn about the work that we're doing to help raise human consciousness on the planet. If you're not already subscribed, please subscribe because this is intelligent listening and high vibrational energy to enjoy your day with. Love you guys. Have an amazing week. I will be back with another episode soon enough. And thanks, you guys, and have a good one. Bye.
Bye.
If you're ready for transformation, check out Glow Up with Shamanisis, the collection of books and courses.